The alien bazaar smelled of rust, oil, and desperation. Ethan Cross pushed his way through the crowded streets, the glow of neon signs reflecting in his tired eyes. This frontier world was a hive of scavengers, traders, and criminals. He had come here for supplies, maybe a few odd jobs to keep his battered ship running another month. He had not come looking for trouble. But trouble had a way of finding Ethan. A sound rose above the clamor of the market, sharp, cruel laughter and the hollow echo of a gavel striking metal. Ethan turned the corner and froze. A slave auction. The stage was little more than a platform of steel. Behind it, cages lined with energy bars pulsed with a dull electric hum. Inside those cages were people, beings of every shape and color. Some bore the marks of chains around their wrists. Others had the vacant stare of those who had already surrendered to hopelessness. Ethan's jaw tightened. He hated slavery. Humanity had outlawed it centuries ago, but out here, beyond the core systems, cruelty still thrived. He knew better than to interfere. One man could not fight an empire of corruption. Still, his hands curled into fists as the auctioneer shouted out numbers in 3 different languages, praising the strength or obedience of the captives. Then, she appeared. 2 guards dragged her onto the stage. She didn't stumble like the others. She stood tall, her back straight, her chin lifted. Her skin shimmered faintly under the harsh lights, a pale silver hue that seemed to catch and bend the glow. Her eyes, deep violet, sharp as blades, swept across the crowd, not with fear, but with defiance. The audience hushed. Even in a place where suffering was routine, this woman stood out. The auctioneer smirked. A rare find, strong, educated, and unbroken, fit for service in any house or on any battlefield. He gestured at her like she was an object on display. Bidding starts high for this one. Numbers began flying. Credits were shouted from every corner. The price soared higher than most captives ever fetched. Whoever she was valuable. Ethan should have turned away. He had no business being there. His wallet was thin, his ship one malfunction away from ruin, yet he couldn't move. He couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something in the way she stood, something in the way she refused to bow her head. She was proud, unbroken, even in chains. Ethan felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. The bidding climbed. Merchants shouted, mercenaries argued. The auctioneer raised his gavel. And before Ethan realized what he was doing, his voice cut through the noise. 10,000 credits. The crowd fell silent. Heads turned. 10,000 was more than most would risk on one slave. It was nearly everything Ethan had left. His heart pounded. What had I just done? The auctioneer's grin widened. Going once? Going twice! The gavel slammed. Sold. The guard shoved her toward Ethan. She did not resist, but neither did she thank him. Her violet eyes locked onto his, sharp and unreadable. For a moment, Ethan felt as if she was studying him, weighing him, judging him. He signed the transaction with a shaky hand. His credits drained away, leaving him nearly broke. The guards handed her over, and just like that, she was his responsibility. As they walked away from the stage, the crowd murmured. Some looked at Ethan with curiosity, others with envy, a few with pity, as if he had just bought more than he bargained for. Ethan led her toward the edge of the bazaar, the neon lights fading behind them. He cleared his throat, awkwardly. "You're safe now," he said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. She didn't answer. She only kept staring at him, silent and composed, as if trying to decide whether he was a fool, a savior, or something else entirely. Ethan exhaled slowly. He had spent his last credits to free her, but for the first time in years, he wondered if perhaps he hadn't rescued anyone at all. Perhaps he had just invited danger onto his ship. And yet, something deep inside told him this moment would change his life forever. The ship hummed softly as it drifted away from the crowded planet, leaving behind the flickering neon haze of the bazaar. Ethan sat in the pilot's chair, his eyes fixed on the stars. The silence in the cockpit felt heavier than the vacuum beyond. Behind him, the woman sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. No chains bound her now. Ethan had cut those the moment they'd stepped onto his ship. Still, she carried herself as though she wore invisible shackles. She hadn't spoken a word since the auction. Not when he offered her food, not when he showed her the cabin where she could rest, not even when he asked her name. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. He wasn't good with people, and he knew it, but he couldn't stand the quiet much longer. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, finally, glancing over his shoulder. "You're free here. I don't own you." Her violet eyes lifted, cool and unreadable. "Freedom," she said softly, her voice carrying an accent unlike any he'd heard. "You speak of it as if it is something you can give." Ethan blinked. It was the first time she had spoken to him. Her tone wasn't hostile, but there was a weight in her words, as if she had seen more of life than she cared to share. "I can give you a choice," Ethan said. "That's more than what you had back there." She tilted her head, studying him in silence. For a moment, Ethan felt as though she were dissecting him with her gaze, seeing every scar, every regret written into his features. Finally, she looked away. "Then what choice do I have? To stay? To leave?" "You can stay until you decide. No chains, no orders, just stay alive." That earned him the faintest flicker of an expression, something that might have been amusement or bitterness, he couldn't tell. The days that followed were uneasy. She rarely left her cabin, but when she did, Ethan noticed her eyes lingering on the controls, the systems, the stars beyond the viewport. She moved with elegance, but also with precision. Every step, every glance carried purpose. One night, as the ship drifted through a quiet sector, a storm of rock and ice suddenly swept across their path. Sensors screamed. Ethan cursed, slamming his hands on the controls. The ship jolted violently, alarms flashing red. Before he could stabilize, she appeared beside him. Without hesitation, she slid into the co-pilot seat and began working the controls with flawless speed. Her hands danced across the console, adjusting thrusters, rerouting power. "Left, 30 degrees," she commanded. Ethan obeyed, surprised by her sharp tone. The ship skimmed dangerously close to a tumbling asteroid. Sparks sprayed as a shard scraped the hull. Ethan gritted his teeth, but she was calm, her violet eyes sharp, unshaken. "Now, cut speed," she ordered. Ethan hit the brakes. The ship lurched, momentum shoving them forward. The rocks thundered past, missing them by meters. Then, silence. Only the steady hum of the engines remained. Ethan exhaled in disbelief. You just saved us." She leaned back, her face composed, but her breathing just a little bit too fast. "That was military-level navigation," Ethan said slowly. "Where did you learn that?" She turned to him, her gaze steady. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice low and guarded, she answered, "I told you before, freedom is not something easily given, and some of us were never meant to be free." Ethan frowned, unsettled by the weight in her tone. "Who are you really?" he asked quietly. Her eyes softened, not with warmth, but with something like sorrow. She looked away, out toward the endless stars. "No one you should have saved," she whispered. The silence that followed was heavier than before, filled with questions Ethan wasn't sure he wanted answers to. And yet, as he watched her return to her cabin, one truth struck him harder than the storm they had just survived. This woman
was not who she seemed. And whatever secret she carried, it was powerful enough to make enemies risk everything to keep her chained.
The stars stretched endlessly, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. For 3 days, he kept the ship in quiet sectors, avoiding trade lanes and patrol routes. Still, the unease lingered. The woman, still silent more often than not, moved about the ship like a shadow. She accepted food, though never much. She kept herself composed, always dignified, always calm. Ethan found himself watching her in the reflection of the cockpit glass, studying the way she stared at the stars as though she was waiting for them to speak. Then came the ping. The scanner lit up. An incoming vessel, fast and direct. Not a freighter, not a trader, military. Ethan cursed under his breath. We've got company. The woman appeared almost instantly, as if she had already sensed it. Who? She asked. Not sure, Ethan replied, working the controls, but they're locking on. Moments later, the comm crackled to life. A sharp, commanding voice filled the cockpit. Unidentified human vessel. Power down your engines. Prepare for boarding. Ethan's stomach twisted. A patrol ship meant trouble. He glanced at the woman. To his shock, her expression wasn't fear, it was weariness, as if she had expected this all along. The patrol ship docked with a hiss of pressurization. Heavy footsteps rang through the corridors. Armed soldiers stormed in, weapons raised. Ethan lifted his hands slowly, heart pounding. But the soldiers didn't look at him. They looked at her. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then the lead soldier lowered his rifle, his head bowed. "Your Highness," he said softly. "Your Highness?" Ethan blinked. The woman stood perfectly still, her violet eyes unreadable. But Ethan saw the flicker in her gaze, reluctance, dread, and something that looked very much like anger. The soldiers dropped to one knee, helmets clattering against the floor in a display of reverence. "Princess Serenia," the commander said, voice trembling with formality. "We thought you were dead." Ethan's mind reeled. Princess? The word didn't fit with the woman he'd bought in a filthy marketplace, and yet, suddenly, everything made sense. Her posture, her bearing, her knowledge of battle and stars. She was no slave, she was royalty. Serenia's voice, when she spoke, was cold steel. "You will rise, and you will not speak my name again." The commander hesitated, confused. "But princess, your people, your throne." "My people," Serenia cut him off sharply, "betrayed me, and my throne was paid for in my family's blood." Her eyes hardened, her tone like a blade against stone. "Tell me," the commander flinched, unable to answer. That was answer enough. Ethan's chest tightened. He realized the truth before she even spoke it. "They sold you out," he whispered. Her gaze flickered to his, and for the first time since he'd met her, Ethan saw raw pain beneath her calm. The soldier shifted uneasily. The commander tried again, his voice desperate. "Your Highness, come with us. The council will restore you. You can reclaim what is yours." Serenia's lips curled into something bitter. "Restore me? No. They would make me their puppet, nothing more. I will not be chained again." The commander hesitated, torn between duty and fear. Ethan saw the moment of decision forming in his eyes. He would take her by force. Before Ethan could think, he stepped forward, his voice cutting the silence. "She's not going with you." Every weapon swung toward him instantly. Ethan's heart thundered, but he held his ground. "You heard her. She doesn't want your throne. She doesn't want your counsel, and I'm not about to let you drag her back into another cage." The commander sneered. "You, a human drifter, do you know what she is? She is worth more than your entire species." Ethan's voice was low, steady. "She's a person. That's enough." The room went deathly quiet. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances.
Serenya's eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in something softer, something like surprise. The commander cursed under his breath, signaling his men, "We'll find her again, and when we do, not even your kind will save her." They withdrew, retreating to their ship. The docking clamps released, and in moments, the patrol ship disappeared into the stars. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan turned to Serenya, his chest still tight. "Princess, huh?" he said, trying to mask the storm inside him. Her shoulders sagged, the mask of steel slipping for just a heartbeat. "I told you, Ethan Cross, I am no one you should have saved." Ethan met her gaze and shook his head. "No, you're someone worth saving, and as long as I'm breathing, they're not taking you." For a long moment she said nothing, but her eyes lingered on him, softer now, as if she were seeing him differently. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, they both knew a truth that changed everything.
The silence after the patrol ship left felt heavier than battle. Ethan's hands still gripped the controls, knuckles white. His ship was a freighter, not a war vessel. If the soldiers had decided to fight, they would both be dead. Beside him, Princess Serenya, though she had never once called herself that, sat motionless, her violet eyes distant. She did not thank him. She did not scold him for risking his life. She simply stared out at the stars, as though searching for answers hidden among them. Ethan finally broke the quiet. "They'll come back." "Yes," she replied. Her tone was calm, but not careless. "And next time, they will not hesitate." Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. "Then we need to disappear. If they're tracking the ship's signature, we're already dead." Serenya turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Do you have a plan?" "I usually make those up as I go." For the next several hours, they worked together. Ethan rerouted power through hidden circuits, masking the ship's emissions. Serenya recalibrated the navigation system, weaving a course through asteroid fields and forgotten trade lanes. Her precision was unnerving. She knew star maps from memory, ancient paths few modern pilots dared to use. At first, Ethan felt the weight of command pressing against him, the instinct to keep control of his own ship. But gradually, he realized something strange. He trusted her. More than that, he relied on her. When exhaustion finally forced them to stop, Ethan brewed 2 steaming cups of bitter stemcalf. He offered one to her, half expecting her to refuse. Instead, she accepted it with quiet grace, her fingers brushing his briefly. They sat in silence, sipping. The hum of the ship wrapped around them like a cocoon. "You've done this before. Running, hiding." Her eyes lowered, the faintest shadow passing over her face. "All my life," she admitted. "Even before the rebellion, even when I wore the crown, I was already in a cage." Ethan frowned. "A cage? You were royalty." "Royalty is just another word for prisoner, Ethan Cross. My every step watched, my every word measured. I was not a daughter, not a sister. I was an heir, a symbol, never a person." For a moment, Ethan had no reply. He thought of his own past, the military years, the orders barked into his ears, the comrades buried on nameless worlds. He thought of the nights after the war when he sat alone in the dark, no one left to remember his name. He understood her better than he expected. "You're not just a symbol," he said softly. "Not anymore." Her eyes lifted, searching his face, and for the first time he saw her guard falter. Just a little. The moment shattered when the alarms blared. A swarm of small ships appeared on the scanner, engines burning hot, pirates by the look of their signature. Ethan cursed, shoving his cup aside. "They've got us on long-range scanners." Serenya slid into the co-pilot's chair. Her voice was steady.
Then we do not run, we outthink them. The chase was brutal. The pirate vessels closed in fast, weapons spitting light across the void. Ethan twisted the freighter through debris fields, the hull groaning in protest. Serenya's hands flew across the controls, feeding him maneuvers, calculating jumps before he could ask. Missiles locked onto them. Ethan dived. Serenya cut power to fake their death, then reignited thrusters to slingshot them around a fractured moon. The pirates overshot. Ethan seized the moment, slamming the hyperdrive. Stars stretched into brilliant lines, and in a flash, the ship was gone. When they finally emerged in empty space, both of them sat breathless, sweat streaking their brows. Ethan laughed shakily. "You're wasted as a princess." Serenya turned to him. This time, her lips curved not to bitterness, but to the smallest, most rare smile. "Perhaps I was never meant to be one." Their eyes lingered on each other, unspoken words thick in the air. A bond had formed, not of duty, not of survival alone, but of something deeper. The universe was hunting them, the odds were against them, and yet, in that quiet moment, Ethan Cross and Princess Serenya were not captor and captive. They were something else. Allies. Partners? Maybe even the beginning of something neither of them dared to name.
Days passed in uneasy calm. Ethan and Serenya kept to quiet sectors, moving like ghosts across the stars. With every jump, every refueling stop, the bond between them deepened, not spoken aloud but felt in the silences. Ethan noticed the way Serenya lingered in the cockpit when he flew, her violet eyes following the constellations with a kind of reverence. Serenya, in turn, noticed the way Ethan always checked the ship's systems twice, never trusting the universe not to pull the floor out from under him. They were both haunted in their own ways, but together, the silence between them no longer felt so heavy. It was during one of these quiet runs that a signal reached them, an encrypted human broadcast. Ethan's eyes widened when he recognized the voice. "Cross, this is Rourke. Old friend, if you're out there, I've got a safe dock for you. No questions asked, just like old times." Ethan leaned back in his chair, half smiling despite himself. Rourke. Another veteran, another survivor of the wars. They had fought side by side once, sharing rations in the mud of foreign worlds. If anyone could be trusted, it was him. When he told Serenya, she studied him quietly. "And you trust this man?" "I've bled with him," Ethan said simply. "If he says it's safe, it's safe." But even as he spoke, something in Serenya's gaze made him pause. The station loomed against the darkness, a cluster of patched-together hulls spinning gently above a barren moon. Rourke was waiting for them, just as he promised. The reunion was loud, filled with claps on the back and the rough laughter of old soldiers. Rourke was broader now, grayer at the edges, but his grin was as reckless as ever. "By the void, Cross, I thought you'd be drinking yourself to death on some rock by now. Instead, you show up with—" His eyes flicked to Serenya, curious. "Company." Ethan stiffened slightly. "She's a friend." Rourke raised his brows but didn't press. "Any friend of yours is safe here." Safe. The word felt good in Ethan's ears. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe it. That night, over stale whiskey and recycled air, Ethan let his guard slip. Rourke spoke of old battles, old scars, things that made the past feel almost bearable. Serenya stayed quiet, but Ethan caught her watching, her gaze sharp, her posture tense. When Ethan finally excused himself to check the ship, Serenya followed him. "You trust too easily," she said softly. I frowned. "He saved my life more than once. That's not something you forget." Her eyes didn't soften. "And yet he looks at me as though I am a prize, not a person. Be careful, Ethan Cross." He wanted to argue, but exhaustion dulled the words. "He's all I've got left," he muttered. The betrayal came at dawn.
Ethan woke to alarms shrieking through the station. Armed mercenaries poured in, weapons raised. Rourke stood at their front, his smile now cold. "I'm sorry, Cross, but she's worth more than your ship, your freedom, hell, even your life. You know how the galaxy works. I can't pass this up." Ethan barely had time to react. He shoved Serenia behind him, drawing his blaster. A firefight erupted, sparks raining as shots lit the corridors. Rourke's men were too many. Ethan took a hit to the side, pain ripping through him. He staggered, vision blurring, but he refused to fall. Serenia caught him before he collapsed. For the first time, her composure shattered. "Ethan," her voice broke, raw with fear. Rourke advanced, smug. "Step aside, princess, or watch your human bleed out." Something inside Serenia snapped. Her eyes blazed, glowing with a light that was not of this world. The air trembled, the metal walls groaning as energy rippled outward from her body. The mercenaries faltered, weapons shaking. With a cry that was half fury, half grief, Serenia unleashed her power. Energy erupted like a storm, hurling soldiers across the room. Sparks exploded, consoles shattered, the station itself shuddering under the force. When the light faded, silence fell. The mercenaries lay unconscious or worse. Rourke was gone, fled into the shadows. Serenia sank to her knees, trembling, her hands still crackling with remnants of power. She stared at them in horror, as though they belonged to someone else. Ethan, bleeding but conscious, reached out weakly. "Hey, it's okay." Her voice broke, thick with shame. "No, you don't understand. This is what I am. A weapon. Destruction." Ethan's hand found hers, gripping it firmly despite the pain. "No," he whispered. "You're more than that. You're more than they'll ever let you believe." Her violet eyes filled with something Ethan had never seen in her before. Fear, yes, but also something fragile and new.
The wound was bad. Ethan had taken hits before, but this one burned deep, tearing through flesh and leaving him weak, feverish. He barely remembered how Serenia got him back aboard the freighter. His last clear memory was her voice, sharp with command but breaking with fear as she dragged him from the ruined station. For days, he drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he woke to the hum of the engines, sometimes to her voice, murmuring in a language he didn't understand. Every time, he found her there, tending to him, steady, unshaken. When the fever finally broke, Ethan opened his eyes to find her sitting at his side, her silver skin glinting softly in the low light of the medbay. Her hands, usually poised with regal restraint, trembled slightly as she pressed a cloth against his forehead. "You should rest," she said quietly. Ethan managed a weak smile. "Kinda hard when someone keeps talking to me." Her violet eyes flicked to his, startled by his teasing. Then, to his surprise, the faintest smile curved her lips. In the days that followed, she barely left his side. She dressed his wounds with precision, but more than that, she cared for him with a gentleness that clashed with the steel he had come to expect from her. She brewed bitter teas from the ship's rations to steady his stomach, guided him when he struggled to sit, and even read passages from star maps aloud when his restlessness grew. "You're good at this," Ethan murmured one night as she adjusted his bandages. "I was never taught to fight wars with weapons alone. A princess must heal as well as command." Her expression darkened. "Though I was never meant to do either, in truth. I was only meant to exist, to be their symbol." Ethan studied her, her downcast eyes, the weight pressing against her voice. He hated it, the thought of her being reduced to an ornament, a tool. "You're not a symbol to me." Her gaze lifted, startled. "Then you're a person, and a damn stubborn one at that." Something flickered in her eyes. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw it, the fragile warmth that had begun to form between them. One evening, As the ship drifted silently through empty space, Ethan awoke to find her asleep in the chair beside him. For once, the steel mask was gone. She looked human, vulnerable. He reached out instinctively, his fingers brushing against hers where they rested on the bed frame. Her eyes opened at the touch. For a long moment, neither moved. "I should not be here," she whispered. "Not with you." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" Her voice wavered, though she tried to keep it steady. "Because I am hunted. Because anyone who stays with me will bleed as you have. Because—" She hesitated, the word catching in her throat. "Because I was never meant to be loved." The silence that followed was thick, charged. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself upright. His wound throbbed, but he didn't care. "Listen," he said quietly. "I've lost people, more than I care to count. And every time I told myself it was easier not to care anymore, not to let anyone in. But you," his voice broke, softer now, "you make me remember what it feels like to fight for something other than survival." Her eyes shimmered, a rare vulnerability breaking through her walls. She looked at him as though she were seeing him for the first time. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then touched his face with trembling fingers. The air between them hummed, not with power, but with something deeper, an unspoken connection neither of them could deny. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought she might close the distance between them, but then she pulled back, her composure snapping into place once more. "You should rest," she said again, though her voice shook. He lay back, watching her retreat into silence. Yet he knew, with absolute certainty, that something had changed. The princess, who had once been untouchable, had let him see her soul. And Ethan Cross, for the first time in years, dared to believe he wasn't alone. The freighter floated on the edge of a dying star system, its engines powered low to avoid detection. The wounds of battle had healed slowly. Ethan's body was still stiff, his ribs sore, but it wasn't the pain that weighed on him. It was the silence. Serenia hadn't spoken much since that night in the med bay. She still cared for him in her quiet way, but something in her eyes had changed. The softness he'd glimpsed was buried beneath a wall of thought, as if she carried a burden too heavy to share. The answer came one evening, when the comms lit up with a scrambled signal. Ethan hesitated before opening the channel, his gut already twisting. The voice that spilled through was sharp, commanding, and far too familiar in its arrogance. "Serenia of House Darien, daughter of the lost throne, heir to the council, you will answer." Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned to Serenia. She sat rigid, her jaw tight, her violet eyes like burning stars. "Your people," Ethan whispered. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The voice continued. "The council demands your return. Your enemies have fractured. The throne is ready for you. Come back and we will restore what was lost. Come back and your people will be whole again." Static fueled the silence that followed. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to shut the channel off, to cut the voice from the air. But it wasn't his choice. It was hers. Serenia stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "Send me coordinates," she said flatly. The comm clicked dead. Ethan stared at her. "You can't be serious." Her gaze didn't waver. "I am the last of my line. Without me, my people will tear themselves apart. They will slaughter each other until nothing remains." "You think going back will save them?" Ethan shot back, rising despite the ache in his side. "They betrayed you, Serenia. They sold you. They'll use you as a puppet until you break, and then they'll throw you away." Her voice sharpened. "They are still my people." "And what about you?" Ethan demanded. "What do you want? Not what they want, not what the council wants. You!" She froze. The word hung in the air like a blade.
For so long she had spoken of duty, of thrones and cages and blood. Never once had she spoken of herself. Her voice faltered. She looked away, her shoulders trembling. Ethan stepped closer, his tone softening. You don't owe me anything, but you don't owe them either. You deserve to choose your own life for once. Her eyes lifted to his, and the mask cracked. The fire in her gaze was mixed now with grief, with longing, with something fragile and dangerous. Hope. They will call me a traitor, she whispered. They already betrayed you. Traitor or not, you'll never be free with them. Silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of the ship and the pounding of their hearts. Serenya's breath trembled. Then slowly, her hand reached out, finding his. I choose, she said softly, her voice shaking but firm. My own path, and I choose you. Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The weight of her words was too heavy, too precious. He only squeezed her hand, silently promising that her choice would never be taken from her again. The stars outside flared as the dying sun cast its last light across the cockpit. In that glow, Serenya stood no longer as a princess, no longer as a prisoner, but something Ethan had never dared believe she could be. Free. And together, they turned their backs on the throne, the council, and the chains of destiny. For the first time, their future was theirs alone.